You could say that he has a predator face.
All right. That's it.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, Nat Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going really well. How are you?
I'm good. Why do you have a smirk on your face?
Because you said my name, of course.
Well, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I hope that everybody listening knows us and we can say, of course, at this point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it just caught me a little off guard.
I like to switch it up every once in a while. Jazz it up. So how's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. I just started a new job, so I've been super busy, but things are well. How about you?
I'm awesome. I've had the last week off from work,
Awesome.
So it's been fantastic. I've just been sitting around playing Madden and watching 30 Rock, and I got to do a show out of town on Monday.
Oh, yeah, I was
in
going to ask how that
Bloomington.
went.
It went really well. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I went with a couple other comedian friends of mine, and I like to consider them my friends, but we never had to spend an extended amount of time together. So that was a lot of fun. We had a little bit of a road trip, and then the show itself went really well. It was a contest, and I was a little disappointed that I didn't place, but it is what it is. It was an audience vote, and
Really?
So a lot of I think a couple of them that placed were hometown people, and I mean not to make excuses or kind of seem catty or anything, but it is what it is. They were funny, and I'm glad that one of them won. I'll just leave it at that. But I mean, it was a good time and it was fun to get out of town and do a show that wasn't in Evansville, and well, I didn't have to follow a punk rock band, so because that has happened.
You're doing one in Louisville soon, aren't you?
Actually, that one got canceled. Thanks for bringing that up. It was actually supposed to be yesterday.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They double booked the club, and of course, my show was the one that got canceled. So
What'd they double book it with?
Oh, I don't know. They just said some special event in the email.
That's a bummer. I kind of want to know what you got pushed aside for.
Well, I mean, I guess you could have looked, but it was yesterday. But
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yep, who cares?
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm enjoying my vacation. We're going to Louisville tomorrow, actually. We're recording this on Thursday, so we're leaving to go out of town for the next couple of days, and then when we get back, I'll be at work again. So
That's a bummer.
Yeah, so when you guys hear this, I'll actually be at work. So I'll be pretty bummed about that.
When you hear this, Pat will not be nearly as happy.
Pretty much. All right, so each episode we start off by checking in with each other. We call it What We're Into. So Tyler, what are you into this week?
This week, the new Walking Dead spinoff show premiered, Fear the Walking Dead, and I finally watched it last night, so a few days late. I was not really that eager to watch it, obviously. It wasn't really a show that I thought was necessary or that I was even remotely looking forward to. In fact, until last week, I thought that it was debuting in October alongside the regular Walking Dead show. I had no idea that it was debuting in August, so needless to say, I hadn't really followed much about this show, but, you know, given that we both watched The Walking Dead and enjoy that show to a certain extent, I figured I'd give it a try, and unfortunately, it really wasn't that good, in my opinion. At least the pilot's not. It does a good job, I guess, of showing what the original show couldn't show, because in the original pilot, you see Rick waking up, and the apocalypse has already happened, so it's kind of interesting to see how it starts, but they took something that could be interesting to watch and they didn't do a very good job of making it fun to watch.
Yeah.
The whole pilot was really boring. Like, you're waiting for shit to hit the fan and you're waiting for stuff to happen, and it just kind of never does. Maybe a little bit towards the end, but not to the extent I thought it would. There's a lot of silly tropes throughout this episode of the show with, oh, this happened, I swear it happened, and you go back and you look, like the person that they're telling this to goes back and look and nothing happened, and this person can't be believed because they're on drugs, but they're the ones who saw it first, and that kind of silly stuff that you see in a lot of horror movies and horror shows. Just all sorts of that stuff littered throughout the episode. Found myself rolling my eyes quite a bit throughout the episode. It was really predictable. Like, I kept looking over at Brittany, my wife, the whole time saying, hey, this is going to happen. Hey, this is going to happen. And it was hitting the nail on the head. And honestly, it was just a little exhausting to go through all of this again. Like, the other show, you're in season 6 now? And so you've had 6 years to see how you build and how you live in this world. And now we're starting all over again with a new show. And it's just exhausting. Just finding things out, how they work in this universe all over again, when you already know that if you die, you become a zombie, and you already know the rules of the show, and you're watching these characters discover it for the first time. It's like, I already did that once. Why do I need to do it again? So, needless to say, I wasn't that impressed.
I also watched this, and I was also not impressed. I agree with you completely that it was very predictable. I found it kind of hard to believe, and I get it that he's a junkie and that it's hard to believe anything that comes out of his mouth, and I get that. But at the same time, they had heard rumors about this happening prior.
Yeah.
So why would it be so hard to believe when he said the exact same thing that they had already been hearing? So that kind of bugged me. It was interesting to see the beginning of the zombie apocalypse, because like you said, we don't see that in The Walking Dead. But at the same time, again, like you said, we know all the rules. Yep. We've already been indoctrinated into this universe. So we're just seeing other people figure out stuff that we've already seen. And The Walking Dead, one of the moments that I really appreciated in the show is when you find out that everybody's already infected. It's a great moment in the comic books, and I thought that it was one of the rare moments in season 2 that I appreciated.
Yeah.
And to have to go through that again, it just seems it's exhausting, like you mentioned.
Yeah, there was. I mean, how many people would you say die a day? Like, I'm sure there's a statistic somewhere, but
yeah, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Tons of people probably die every day. So I have a hard time believing that it's such a slow burn. Like, this whole episode, it's not widely known. Even at the end of the episode of this hour, 20-minute episode, whatever it was, it's not widely spread yet.
Yeah.
Yet the episode starts off with somebody seeing a zombie or seeing a walker or whatever they're going to call them in this show.
Yeah.
So it's hard to believe that it hasn't caused widespread panic by the end of that 2 or 3 day period that this show covers.
Yeah.
I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess it just depends on when that person gets, I don't know. It seems unlikely. Yeah.
There was one part of the episode I liked. There's this kid that tries to go into school and the metal detector goes off and he has a knife, and he tells, the junkie's mom, who's I guess the principal or something at the school.
Yeah.
That he's scared because of all of these rumors of things that had happened with the dead coming back to life. And he doesn't put it like that, but I forget how he says it. And then there's a point later at the episode where they let school out early, and the principal lady, she walks out, and the kid is on the bus just giving her the eye.
Yeah.
I told you, bitch.
Yeah.
So that was that made me laugh, and it probably wasn't supposed to make me laugh, but.
Something just occurred to me. I'm assuming eventually this family or some other variation, there's going to be a group, just like there's a group in The Walking Dead. Yep. The main group that you follow, I'm assuming that there's also going to be one of those eventually in Fear the Walking Dead. And I'm assuming that they're going to meet up eventually. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how they do it.
That was kind of my next point, is because they're so far behind the other show, how are they going to catch up?
Yeah. How many years would you say have gone by on The Walking Dead? Obviously, it's been on for they're going in the 6th season, so 6 years, but I feel like it hasn't taken place over 6 years. I think it would
seem like to me, I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that knows it a little bit better than we do. It seems like Rick was out for a while.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's somebody out there that knows exactly when I haven't watched the first season in a long fucking time. Of course, she got pregnant. His wife got pregnant.
And had
a baby. That's 9 months right there. So I would say at least a year and a half, probably 2 years.
That's what I was thinking, was probably 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So we're 2 to 3 years behind and on the other side of the country right now. But I'm sure the end goal is for them to eventually meet up, and I'm curious to see how they'll do that.
Yeah, this show really faltered. It has the same problems that I have with The Walking Dead.
I mean, so far there's not a single character I like on this show either.
I like the woman, and the guy is not too bad. And they're both fairly established actors and actresses, so it seems like the quality as far as the acting is concerned is going to be pretty decent.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that they're going to be introducing more characters, because right now we've only really been introduced to a couple of the teachers at the school and then, of course, the family. So we'll have to grow a little bit, but I'm curious to see how this season progresses. I think it's only like 6 or 7 episodes, isn't it?
I do not know.
I know the first season of The Walking Dead was 6 episodes, and I want to say this is similar. It's a pretty shortened run.
Which is weird, because I know The Walking Dead was so short because they weren't sure how people were going to respond to it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have established one of the best shows ever on cable, and it's a spinoff of that show. You would think that they would have a little bit more faith in it.
Yeah, I mean, and now that we're talking about the other show in that first season, the more I think about it, the more I think I might have been let down with the pilot, was because The Walking Dead's pilot is one of the best pilots of all time. Like that.
I wouldn't go quite that far, but it's decent.
I love it. Frank Darabont directed it, and I don't know, it's so completely, if you go back and watch it too, I think you'll see how far the show's kind of strayed away from that. And I think Frank Darabont leaving the show, negatively impacted it quite a bit. It's nothing like that pilot was. Like that pilot was just, I don't know, it was really good. And I maybe it was like the circumstances around watching it too. I remember it debuted on Halloween one year, and it was just cool watching that. Right around that time of year but obviously the show's gone a long ways away from that. So, and it's become an entirely different beast.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. What are you into this week?
Well, like I said in the open, I've been playing a ton of Madden, but I won't talk about that because we're recording this on Thursday, and I just posted just a few hours ago my first impressions of the new Madden game on our website, thenerdspodcast.com. So I won't kind of double down on that. I will talk about the 2 other things real quick that I have experienced in the last week or so. I watched 2 episodes of the new IFC series, Documentary Now, starring Fred Armisen and Bill Hader. It is really fucking weird, but weird in a really good show, in a really good way. It's kind of it's a very different style of comedy. They kind of take documentaries, and the first episode, it's just about this woman and her mom, and they murder people. It's really weird. And then the second episode is about this really like guerrilla style. I mean, they're fucking morons. These guys are morons, but they kind of dub themselves as like a guerrilla style documentary crew, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they go into Mexico to like try to find this like infamous Mexican drug lord, and each crew just ends up getting killed because they're fucking morons. And it's really funny, but it's definitely a dark comedy, and each episode is a completely different show, essentially.
Really?
It's called Documentary Now because it's always each show is a different documentary about a different subject. So it's interesting that way, and I really liked how they're going to always have material, because you can't really, I mean, if you're doing a different story each time, you can't really ever run out of stories. And it is, I don't know if he wrote any of the episodes, but I know Seth Meyers is the executive producer on the show. So, I mean, there's a lot of good talent behind it. And it's, like I said, it's weird, but in the best way possible.
So I might have missed it. Was Fred Armisen and Bill Hader's role on the show then?
They play basically the main characters in each documentary. Like the first episode, like I said, was about this woman and her mother. I actually came in like halfway through this episode, so I'm not quite. I missed the first part of it, but my wife was watching it anyways. And they just play the main characters in each documentary. Like the second episode, it was funny because the crew, it was a 2-man crew each time, and it was always Bill Hader and Fred Armisen, but they just played different people each time, and it was really funny, the different characters that they played each time that they sent in a new crew, and how they fuck up every single time, and it's really funny.
And it's always a comedy?
It's a dark comedy.
Okay.
And Jack Black plays their boss in the documentary, or in the second episode. I think they call them like the company's called like Drones or something, like it's something weird like that. And it's really funny. I mean, if you like that weird kind of dark comedy aspect to it. I mean, they're famous, and so they're able to kind of get those more famous actors to kind of come in and help out. Like I said, Jack Black's their boss in the second episode. So I'm really looking forward to it. And if you like that kind of strange, weird humor, I definitely say check it out.
Yeah, cool. I'll have to. That sounds interesting.
And the second thing I wanted to talk about is I've been binge watching the last few seasons of 30 Rock on Netflix the last couple of days. I had watched the first 4 seasons on Netflix a couple of years ago. When I was student teaching, I'd binge watch like 4 or 5 episodes each night, and it kind of kept me sane during my student teaching. And I just never got back to it. It's definitely a show that I fell in love with, but it wasn't one that, because I didn't have a DVR at the time, and I was just so busy I could never keep up with it. So I never kept up with it. Well, just the last couple of days, I realized I haven't watched the last few seasons of 30 Rock, and so I started binge watching that in between games of Madden, and this show is so fucking funny, man. It's one of those shows that, as a comedian, I get jealous that I don't think I'm ever going to be that funny. Like, there's certain jokes that I think would work really well as stand-up bits, and I'm kind of bitter that I didn't think about it. I feel like it would, if I was a musician, I would feel the same way if I had like heard a song that I really liked. Yeah. Like, God damn it, I wish I'd wrote that song. I feel the same way when I watch 30 Rock is, God damn it, I wish I wrote that joke. There's probably a moment like that in each episode that I watch. And it's just a fantastic show.
Yeah, I've never seen an episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's a show that I wanted to get into, and then you blink your eyes, and it's like 5 seasons in, and you're like, wow, that's a commitment. And so
I mean, they're only 22.
Yeah. I mean,
minutes.
I'm still going through Friends, though, and when did that come out on Netflix?
Yeah, that's true. That took me a couple of months, man. That takes a while. That is a commitment.
I mean, I'm like in season 7, so I'm towards the finish line, but it's just one of those things where I don't know, I fall away from it, then I'll come back to it. So maybe 30 Rock is a show I'll pick up eventually, because it does intrigue me. There's a lot of talent on that show, and everybody talks about how amazing it was, so it is a show that I'd like to eventually sit down and watch.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Did you see Tracy Morgan's going to be hosting Saturday Night Live?
I did. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Because, I mean, did you see his interview on the Today Show a few months ago?
No.
It was super fucking depressing. Don't watch it.
I kind of figured it was going to be like that.
Yeah, so it's cool that he's going to be back on Saturday Night Live doing comedy, because he's a really funny dude.
For sure.
Is he really good on that show?
Oh, he's fantastic in the show. I mean, he plays Martin Lawrence kind of character that's just kind of really weird, and he lives a fucking weird ass lifestyle, and he's just an idiot, and it's hilarious. Like, I just watched this episode the other day where one of the characters is Tracy Jordan is his name in the show, and Tracy just figured out that you can get porn on the internet, and they're like, oh, he's never going to come out of his dressing room, and just stuff like that. It's really funny, and he's great in it. And I mean, everybody's awesome in it.
Awesome. I look forward to watching it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. You ready to go on to the next segment?
Sure.
All right. So every week we have a segment where we discuss the comics we've been reading. Pat and I are huge nerds, and part of what comes with the nerd domain is reading comic books, and we each read quite a bit, so we highlight 1 or 2 that we're really enjoying right now. So, Pat, you want to go first?
Sure. I am sitting here in my new Secret Wars t-shirt that I got from my Marvel Collector Core box, which I really love.
Wish they're paying us to say that.
I wish they were. I would be okay if they just gave me the boxes for free.
Yeah,
I'd be cool with that.
You should just write somebody an email being like, hey, we do this podcast and a few people listen to it. Will you just send me a free box if I bring it up?
But anyways, I am going to talk about the new issue of Secret Wars, which I don't know if you're going to...
5, right?
It is number 5. I don't know if you're going to bring this up in Nerd News because I honestly very rarely ever know what you're going to bring up as part of the charm of it.
Yes, I was, and I don't have a lot of nerd news, so I'd appreciate it if you don't
Okay, I will just keep that to myself. Then we will have that discussion here momentarily. Anyways, so Secret Wars number 5 is, I don't want to say the worst issue of the series so far, because I do think that there's some good character work and there's a lot of good backstory. I wasn't one of the readers of Avengers and New Avengers, which is where Secret Wars kind of picks up from. So I didn't really know some of the backstory, and this issue kind of gives you a lot of how Battleworld was created, and they introduce Molecule Man. Well, I mean, they don't introduce him. They introduce him into Secret Wars, not into the comics. He's been in the comics for a while. And there's a lot of Doom stuff in here, but I just feel like it's very exposition heavy.
Yeah.
It focuses a lot on the backstory, and they don't really move the plot forward pretty much at all. It felt like the writers got to the last few pages and was like, oh shit, we should probably make something happen. And so they just threw in a few things at the end to kind of move the plot forward a little bit. But other than that, it's a lot of exposition, it's a lot of background, it's a lot of Doctor Doom chit-chatting with people, and that's pretty much it. So it's a slow episode. There's a lot of dialogue, which I've talked about in the past and I'm not a huge fan of, but that's the only comic book I've read in the last week, so that's what I'm bringing up.
I read it last night, actually, and as much as I have shit on Secret Wars, and I will still continue to do so, I really am not a huge fan of this run. I really liked issue 4.
Yes.
So this issue was definitely a letdown. I think it could have gone a lot more places with spoiler. Never mind. I won't say characters that die or anything, but with what Doom did at the end of issue 4, it could have gone a lot of different directions. And I think that they slowed it down a little too much, especially when it's a mini series of only a select few issues, which we'll get into shortly. So I think I zoned out a little bit because it was so boring. What's going on with Molecule Man? I got he's a bomb or something?
Yes.
All right.
And it's really, from what I understand, because like I said, I didn't read Avengers or New Avengers. I guess there's multiple of him.
Yeah.
And they tried to destroy them. It's kind of convoluted.
Oh yeah, I super zoned out during that dialogue. I was like, oh shit, I should probably pay attention to what I'm reading here because that seemed important. But
yeah,
I didn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah, it was, and I guess that's how they created Battleworld.
Yeah.
By destroying Molecule Man.
But he's not destroyed. I'm
destroying. I guess there's copies of them.
Other variations.
Yes.
Of him. Okay. Whatever,
yes.
Man.
Email us if you understand the nerd you're looking for at gmail.com because neither one of us clearly understood exactly what was going on.
Obviously. Okay. So we good on Secret Wars?
Yeah, that's all I had. I mean, it's very background exposition heavy.
Which I'll get into my comic, but I just can't understand how you devote an entire issue of a limited run to that. Like, you would seem like you'd want to fit as much into each book as you could. But,
well, they haven't done a lot of backstory yet, so
yeah,
I kind of understand why they did it, but it still doesn't make up for the fact that it was pretty boring.
Yep, for sure. All right, so I read quite a few comics last night, just trying to catch up, and the one that stood out to me a lot and that I wanted to talk about is Star Wars 7.
Okay, I have not read that one yet.
Read it yet.
No,
it's great. It's fantastic. So it's basically takes place in one of my most intriguing parts of the Star Wars universe's history that we don't really know a lot about, and that's the time that takes place between episode 3 and 4.
Okay.
And it's basically Obi-Wan's exploits. during that time on Tatooine, kind of looking over Luke. And this has been a period of time that's always intrigued me quite a bit, and I've always been curious about. And I know that there was rumors like a month or two ago about there possibly being anthology movies that focus on this time, and with Ewan McGregor coming back as Obi-Wan, and that really excited me. So that being said, I was really surprised that that's exactly what this comic showed, because theoretically this is canon now. So the exploits they're showing from Obi-Wan is technically canon, and it makes me wonder how this will impact potential anthology movies that would happen in this period.
Sure.
So, it's pretty cool. Basically, it has to do with Obi-Wan on Tatooine as a hermit, and has to basically hide the fact that he's a Jedi. He sees, Jabba the Hutt's thugs, like, going around collecting moisture taxes from the moisture farmers, and he basically can't do anything about it. He really wants to, but he doesn't want to blow his cover.
Yeah.
So he kind of has to turn a blind eye to it. His only job is to protect Luke Skywalker. And then there's a point in the book where a young Luke gets in trouble and Obi-Wan saves him, and it's really awesome. But this book had a really cool theme to it. So like I mentioned, Jabba the Hutt has some thugs that are going around collecting moisture taxes, and it had a really big gangster vibe, like a gangster movie.
Sure.
And that was really awesome. An awesome feel, and it just kind of gave a really cool cultural side of Tatooine that we haven't seen before, like what it would actually be like to live on that planet through Obi-Wan's eyes. So that was really cool. This, like I said, is one of the most interesting periods in Star Wars to me. I'm really curious what happened. So I thought it was really awesome they did that. They basically do it as a flashback. Luke finds like a journal that Obi-Wan had written or left, and it's basically him reading about his exploits. So I'm curious how much they'll continue this in the future issues, but it was really awesome.
Yeah, I was kind of curious when you first started how they flash back like that, because the current Star Wars run is in between 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So I was curious when you said it was in between 3 and 4, how they did that. So that's cool.
Yeah, he found the journal, I guess, in issue 6.
Okay.
And then this issue just starts off with an Obi-Wan story, and you don't see Luke till the end. And
okay, cool.
He's with R2, and it's cool. All right, that's all I got for comments.
All right, cool. Our next segment, I'm just going to give it over to Tyler. He compiles all the good nerd news for the last couple of weeks, and like he's mentioned before, it's kind of slim pickings this week, but we'll talk about whatever he's got. So what's nerd news this week?
I would say it's a little better than last week, but it's still not great. George Miller's rumored to be directing Man of Steel 2, but then it came out that he wouldn't, like, that movie is on permanent hold, but he's maybe going to be directing a different DC movie. So, I mean, I have mixed feelings about that. I would rather see George Miller devote what time he has left, as sad as that is to say, to original things, or maybe more Mad Max, because Fury Road was so amazing.
Yeah.
I think that he'd have a great vision for whatever it is he does, but I don't think that a DC movie is necessarily the best choice for him at this point in his life.
Yeah. I was pretty psyched when I heard about the Man of Steel 2 stuff, because I am not a fan of Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And I don't like what I've seen so far of Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad. So I'm a little bit nervous about this universe that they're building. So it'd be kind of cool to see somebody not named Zack Snyder kind of take over Man of Steel.
Yeah.
But like you said, it sounds like it's going to be on hold. I do agree with the notion he is getting pretty old, and I would like to see him get, selfishly, I would like to see him kind of finish Mad Max before he did anything else. But I mean, it is what it is. If he wants to do Man of Steel 2, I'm not going to argue with that, because like I said, I'd like to see somebody else's vision for DC.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. Like I said, I think he'd have a cool vision for it, and he almost directed a Justice League movie.
Yes.
Quite a few years ago.
Yep.
Which sounds like it would have been pretty interesting, and that fell apart. So obviously, I guess he has something he wants to say in this universe. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't know that it'll ever come to fruition, to be honest.
Probably not.
All right. Speaking of things that probably aren't going to come to fruition, The rumor out there right now is that there's a new Blade series or movie being plotted, except it won't focus on Blade. It will focus on Blade's daughter, who has a comic coming out when Marvel Now launches after Secret Wars.
Yep.
And I think that is a crazy rumor as well. I don't see that happening, but that is something that was picked up this week. You're shaking your head.
The comic sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a good Blade comic because I think he's a cool character. But the movie and the TV show or whatever, that's never going to happen. They already tried a Blade TV show and it didn't work. So
yeah. Well, nobody said TV show. It says that a fourth Blade film is in promote, but I can't see them doing. If Daredevil can't get a movie and we're going to give a movie to Blade's daughter,
yeah,
I don't know. It sounds like more like a Netflix show to me.
Yeah, for sure. I have no desire to see that. I'm excited for the comic book. Like I said, that sounds awesome, but I don't think we need another movie.
If they're going to make another Blade movie, you got to relaunch it in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you make that work in the Marvel universe with vampires and stuff.
Yeah.
To be honest. All right, we'll just move along. This was hinted at earlier, but Secret Wars has been extended from 8 issues to 9 issues.
Yeah. They're really screwing our schedule, our podcast schedule, because we had originally, it was supposed to be done at the end of August.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not going to happen because it's already the end of August and they haven't come out with 6 yet. And we were going to do a full recap of all of Secret Wars. We had to push that back. Now it sounds like they're extending it at least one more issue that's going to come out in December, but it's not going to affect the new comics that are coming out after number 8.
Yeah.
So that would lead me to believe that number 9 is really not going to do anything. So what are we doing here, guys?
It's really strange. Like, even if you look at the issues of Secret Wars you have, it says 1 of 8, 2 of 8, 3 of 8.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a last minute thing, and I wonder what the creative decision behind that was. Like, I don't know who's writing it, but I wonder if they were like, I just have too much story to tell. I gotta have a 9th issue. Like, at this point,
you have too much story to tell because 5 was boring as shit.
I mean, at this point, just make 8 like a double issue.
Yeah, that would be cool.
And go with it that way. I mean,
to be honest with you, they probably already have 8 done though.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't fucking know what's going on with this shit. I mean, I've been pretty vocal about my disdain for Secret Wars, so the fact that I have to suffer through another issue of it, I'm not looking forward to.
I just don't think that it's gonna make a whole lot of difference because it just kind of dilutes the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because 8's supposed to be this huge, well, I mean, the miniseries as a whole is supposed to be this huge event, but then you're tacking on another issue. So you're telling me that 8 isn't the finale I've been waiting for. I don't know. It just kind of dilutes the whole process.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So this next one, I won't talk about if you don't want me to, because it's kind of spoilery.
Well, you're going to talk about it anyway.
No, like, honestly, if you don't want me to talk about it, we'll skip it. So there was some promo art that came out today that revealed the sides in Captain America Civil War. Like,
yeah, I'm not going to talk about that.
You don't want to know?
No, I don't. I've been purposely, this in Star Wars, I've been purposely trying to stay away from all that shit. And they post way too much of that bullshit.
I've stayed away from everything Star Wars related, but I think as soon as the first trailer comes out for this movie, this is going to be in it, like who's on whose side. So if you don't want to know, I'll exit out of that story and we won't talk about it.
I'll still post it under our nerd news tab. I just won't read the story.
Yep. And we'll just move right along. So this,
right.
I actually just saw this as soon as I was pulling up articles for us recording. Mads Mikkelsen is being eyed for a villain role in Doctor Strange.
Okay.
So
I don't know who that is.
Hannibal,
Oh.
Casino Royale.
Nah.
He's going to be in Rogue One, but he's not going to be a villain in Rogue One. That's come out. So
That's weird. He's got a villain face.
yeah, I think that's why everybody was surprised. He's always a villain in everything. So, obviously we had announced, or we didn't announce shit. It had been announced and we talked about, Chiwetel Ejiofor had been cast as Baron Mordo, the villain in Doctor Strange, but apparently there will be another one present and Mads Mikkelsen is up for that. So we don't know who it would be, but I like him a lot as an actor, so I'm all for it.
I mean, other than Casino Royale, I don't think I've ever seen him in anything. I never watched Hannibal.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I don't know that I've seen him in a whole lot, but I love him in Casino Royale.
He was in a foreign film that got nominated for the Oscar, but about a pedophile or some shit. I never watched that.
Did he play the pedophile?
I believe so. He's got a villain face / pedophile face.
Oh, he would appreciate that.
You could say that he has a predator face.
All right. That's it. That's all I got for nerd news.
All right. So our next segment is just kind of called our main topic. We didn't really come up with a clever title for it just because it changes from episode to episode. Last week I talked about my 10 through 6 favorite films of all time, and so now it's Tyler's turn to talk about his favorite films 10 through 6. I will be doing my 5 through 1 next episode, and he will be doing his 5 through 1 the following episode. So before you get started, Tyler, how'd you compile your list?
Very stressfully. I'm pulling my hair out putting this list together. I haven't done a top 10 movies since high school.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had it somewhere, like on paper, because it's so drastically different now. I'm trying to think of the movies that were on that list that aren't on it anymore. Like Sin City was on it. Like, I fucking loved Sin City.
That's a good movie, but that is not top 10 worthy.
Not at all. But I remember that vividly being on there. The Prestige was on there, and it's not on my list anymore. I really liked that movie when it came out, and you
could defend that one. And that's better than Sin City.
I was definitely on Christopher Nolan's dick at the time, and I still kind of am. Yeah. So that was why it was in there. But just that list doesn't define me anymore.
Yeah.
I think this list better does a little bit. But like I said, I was very stressed putting it together, just because when you put a top 10 list of things that you really love and you really admire, you're putting yourself out there for criticism.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's a little stress with that. But basically, like you mentioned last week, I strongly differentiate between best and favorite.
Yep. So, I think you have to.
Yeah. So I'm by no means saying that any of these movies are the best movies ever made. They're just my favorites for particular reasons we'll get into. I think that a couple of them could be on the best films of all time, but you'll probably find right away whenever I start with number 10 that a lot of them wouldn't be.
And like we talked about last week, Tyler did not know the movies I was going to talk about, and I do not know the movies that he's going to talk about. We just kind of wanted it that way because we're both interested in what we have to say, so we kind of wanted to be surprised. I think other podcasts would have wanted to know so they could prepare their rebuttal or their comments or whatever. But I just kind of am excited to hear what Tyler has to say, so I wanted to be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, this list is pretty personal to me. All of these movies have a place on the list for a reason. A lot of the movies are on there because of memories surrounding them, or maybe just some of them are on there because I have a blast every time I watch them. They're all on here for a different reason, and we'll get into it. I think that these movies will probably shift in order from year to year for me, just kind of where I'm feeling at that point in my life. But now that I have them on paper, I plan on keeping it updated. I don't know how much it will update, but it's kind of cool to have this list that's like my top 10 favorite movies. So
sure.
I'm glad we're doing it. So with that being said, I think I'm ready to get started if you're ready to go.
All right, let's do it.
All right. So number 10 is probably the most out there movie on my top 10. A lot of these would probably be pretty predictable, but I have a feeling that this is going to surprise you that's on here. And it's also the newest movie that's on here.
Okay. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
No, it is not. Actually, so the way I compiled this list was I just, off the top of my head, I went through my Blu-ray list. I went through IMDb and just messed around for a while and, came up with like 30 movies that.
Yeah, I pretty much had, I think it was like 28 or 29. Yeah.
And so I dwindled those down. And this movie was on the cusp of making it or not making it. So I watched it last night to kind of decide if or if not it was one of my favorite movies of all time. And after watching it, I decided it was. And that movie is About Time.
Okay.
So what's interesting about Time being number 10 is that the year it came out, it wasn't even number 1 for me.
Yeah.
I think The Dark Knight Rises was technically my favorite movie that year. And spoiler alert, The Dark Knight Rises is not on this list. But About Time, I don't know. It just hit me at the right point in my life where I needed to see a movie like that. I was engaged at the time I saw it, and this movie is very much about a young man growing up and going through the stresses and the adventures of dating, and then finding the woman that he loves and falls in love with and marries. And then I'm going to spoil it, and I'm sorry. I really recommend seeing it. But he ends up losing his dad, which is really dramatic, and just following him through basically his 20s into his early 30s is exactly what I was doing, what I'm doing now, and what I was doing when I first saw it. Getting ready to be, it came out right before I got married. So just like I said, the right point in my life to see a movie like this. I really enjoy how it takes us through his entire story, his entire young adulthood. Like I said, it shows the struggles of him dating, which we're all familiar with those struggles. It's not a movie that I want to watch over and over, but it's definitely a movie that I'll watch from time to time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get old to me. It's one of the top movies I've connected with, and I think that's probably why it has a spot on my top 10. It's not necessarily a love story, even though that's kind of how it's played out to be. It's a story also about a man and his dad and a guy growing up, which always hits me. I love the moral of the story, which is basically about enjoying and appreciating life to the fullest, both the good and the bad times. And then I'm also, a sucker. I've said it a few times on the podcast. I'm a sucker for a movie that elicits an emotional response from me.
Yeah.
And this was definitely it, for sure. I cried the first time I saw this movie, and I watched it and I watched it last night. I'm like, I won't cry again. I know exactly what the fuck's gonna happen. And I bawled again. I'm putting myself out there saying that for ridicule, but there's not a lot of movies that elicit that kind of response from me, but About Time is one of those movies.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. I don't know. It definitely didn't make my 29 or whatever, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy that movie. It's one of those movies, like you said, I enjoy it, and it definitely elicits an emotional response. Maybe not the same emotional response because I'm a man, but it's not necessarily a movie that I will watch a lot, just because it is that it does kind of pull at your heartstrings a little bit, and it definitely it is really emotional, and it's not something that I will look forward to, because there's a few moments in the movie that are just really kind of tough to watch because you do care about these characters and what's going on in the movie. So it's kind of tough to watch at certain spots. So it's not necessarily a movie that I'll watch a ton of times, but I enjoy it every time I do watch it.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it a ton of times. Like I said, I think that this list is going to evolve year to year, and I could see it eventually falling out of my top 10. I mean, it's right there on the cusp of falling out anyways at number 10, but at this point, it's in my top 10 favorites. So.
All right, cool, man.
All right, number 9 is Seven.
Okay.
So I was torn between putting this movie or Fight Club on the list. I saw them both around the same time, and they were both my introductions to David Fincher. I actually saw Seven first, and I really just adore both of them. The reason that I put this movie on the list instead of Fight Club is, again, I saw it first, but I don't know, it has a special place for me because it was one of the first movies that I was ever introduced to by some of my buddies in high school. So in high school, that's really when I started to become a movie buff, and there were a lot of movies that I had never seen and never heard of, and a good friend of mine, Jake, introduced me to quite a bit through freshman and sophomore year, and this was one of the first movies he told me I had to watch. And I remember the exact time he showed it to me, what TV it was on, and what my reaction was. So it's just one of those very vivid memories for me around this movie. And I hadn't actually seen it in a couple of years, and I watched it last weekend with my wife. And watching her, she had never seen it, and watching her kind of react the same way I did to the twists and the turns and the grunginess of this movie, reminded me why I loved it so much. So this movie has a great grungy tone. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, really complement each other really nicely in it. And then, Kevin Spacey coming along as John Doe, the serial killer. He's super creepy and super effective. I really enjoy the storytelling in this movie and watching things unravel as they put the case together and go to these crime scenes where these grisly murders have happened is really, I don't want to say cool to watch because it almost makes your heart sink into your stomach with how, like I said, grungy and gritty it is. And it's not really a gory movie, but it definitely
it kind of is.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it makes your skin crawl a little bit whenever you walk into these crime scenes. It still makes me squirm even after I've seen it countless times. And I know that the end of it has become kind of mocked in a way. But, you know, watching it is a really iconic ending. And it's just devastating and mind-blowing. Like watching Brittany, my wife, react to it, not knowing anything about it, and not knowing how it ended, kind of reminded me of that whenever we watched it last weekend.
I've talked about this a few times. My parents kind of let me watch whatever I wanted to watch. I mean, a lot of times they would watch it with me and kind of put it in perspective, and I applaud them for that. They're one of the reasons I became the movie buff I am today. This is one of those movies that I kind of point to that I shouldn't have been allowed to watch this movie. I saw this movie when it came out.
Wow, that's like 95.
Yeah. I was 8 years old. Like I said, I appreciate that style of parenting, and if I were to ever have a kid, that's probably the route I would go as well, mostly because I want to watch movies, and I don't want to have to watch animated movies over and over again. But this movie scared the shit out of me. We're actually going to be doing an episode closer to Shocktober. We haven't quite nailed down the details yet, but I think it's probably just be the movies that scare us. Not necessarily the scariest movies, but just the movies that scare us personally. And this movie came to mind when I was thinking about that list. Just because when they walk into I don't know what sin it is.
I'm going to guess sloth.
No,
not sloth.
Maybe it is. It's where the pine trees.
Yeah, sloth.
Yeah, that scared the fuck out of me when I was a little kid. Like, serious. And it just has that gritty feel to it, like you said. It just, I don't know, just the way it's even shot, the colors and just
it's always raining.
Yeah, it just has that gritty feel to it. And Morgan Freeman's character is just kind of, he doesn't really give a shit because he's going to retire soon.
Yeah.
And it really has, it checks all the boxes for me in a really solid movie.
Yeah, you brought up sloth. I remember jumping so bad the first time I saw that, and then watching Brittany jump when we watched it last week, and it just reminded me of my first time watching it and how much I enjoyed that experience. It's not a movie that I'll watch like every week because I love it so much. I mean, it's dark.
It takes a little bit out of you to watch that movie.
For sure, but I think that's part of, I don't want to say it's charm because it doesn't have any charm, but part of the appeal to me is that, again, it kind of elicits an emotional response. Yeah,
for sure. I actually hadn't watched it in a really long time, and then I watched it for last year's Shocktober, and I really enjoyed it. I was actually kind of nervous because I remember how much it scared me before, and so I feel like it almost has to make that list that I was referring to earlier, because I was almost not necessarily dreading watching it, but I was a little bit nervous while watching it because I knew that it scared me so much when I was a kid.
Yeah, I'll definitely be watching it this Shocktober.
All right, cool.
I've never watched it during a Shocktober, but
it's kind of on that bubble whether or not it qualifies. But for me, it did because it scared me so much the first time I watched it. So it reminded me how terrified I was of this movie. And I mean, it's well done. Like I said, the way it's shot, it definitely has that gritty feel. So it's a stretch, but I still think it really does qualify.
Oh, for sure. So, number 8.
All right.
Number 8 is a movie we talked about last week, and you're 10-6. It's The Thing.
It was number 8 for me as well.
Was it?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. So, a running theme with a few movies in this list is kind of what I talked about with 7. It was a movie that was introduced to me in high school whenever I was kind of forming as a film buff. And I had seen this movie before at stores or at movie rentals places. And I just knew it by its cover. And I didn't know anything about it, but I thought that it was probably some cheesy horror movie that just like all the others that were surrounding it, you know, and never really gave it much thought because I had never heard anything about it. And then again, just my buddies in high school, like, you haven't seen this movie, it's fantastic. And I remember we watched it, and it was like late a Saturday night, right around Halloween, and I was just blown away by how much I actually enjoyed it. Probably because I had such low expectations for it going into it. We talked about it quite a bit last week, so I don't really have a ton of details as far as the actual movie goes, but it is for sure my favorite sci-fi horror of all time. I think I've said that before. John Carpenter is a mastermind. I actually almost included Halloween on my list as well. That's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I ended up not. I ended up kind of going the route with The Thing because I do think that this is a better movie and more effective storytelling. Even I would say it's really original as well, even though it's technically a remake. I've never seen the original, so I have no basis in knowing that, but I can't imagine a movie made in the 50s or 40s or whenever it was filmed was anything like this. And
I feel like this version of The Thing is closer to the book because it's based on a book.
Okay,
it's a short story or something like that. It may not be a full-on novel, but I know it's at least a short story. And I think John Carpenter's is closer to the original story.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into much more detail because we went into a lot of the plot and stuff last week that makes this movie so good. And obviously with it being on both of our lists, it's something that we both adore. But this is a movie I watch yearly. I do watch every Shocktober, if not more times a year, just because it's such a fun watch. And even after knowing all the twists and turns, it's really entertaining.
Yeah, it's definitely a Shocktober staple for me. This movie, The Descent, the remake of The Crazies, those happen every single Shocktober for me.
Awesome. So, anything else you have to say about The Thing? I know that you
I talked about it last week, so there's not a whole lot I can say about this movie. I agree with everything that you said, and I doubt that this will be the last time we ever talk about this movie because we both adore it.
Yep, I'm sure it'll come up in our Shocktober episodes here in the next couple months, which I'm super excited for, by the way.
Oh yeah,
I can't
for sure.
wait for Halloween time. All right, so moving on to number 7. This was another movie that I kind of teetered with putting it on the list and where it would fall on the list. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that the 7th spot was ideal for it. And that movie's Toy Story 3.
Okay.
So it's another movie like About Time that hit me at the perfect time in my life when I should see a movie like this, which is kind of silly talking about an animated movie that way. But obviously we all know Pixar is great at telling stories, and this movie's no exception. I remember this movie came out my sophomore or junior year of college, and this film has to do with Andy going away to college. And I think the reason I related to it so much was because these characters and the character of Andy were characters I fell in love with in 2nd grade.
Yeah.
Which was absurd to me. Like this movie that I loved when I was, 7 years old. Here I was 11, 12 years later, maybe even more. It might have even been a longer gap than that. And I'm watching it as a college student, just like connecting with it just as much as I did whenever I was a 2nd grader. That was just interested in the toys come to life aspect of it. So I loved revisiting the characters, like I said, and it ended up being a perfect storm for me. And it will be a movie I always think of fondly and look back on. The only thing that I will not fondly look back on was the first time I saw this movie. The movie going experience is not the best memory, and we won't dive too deep into that, but it has to do with an ex-girlfriend and that kind of shit. So, I wish that the situations around watching the movie for the first time were better, but it was, still a really good experience, and it's a movie I've watched multiple times since, and I still find myself connecting with.
Would it have been higher on your list if they had died at the end like they should have?
That pisses me off. I wish I had wrote that note because I was going to start off with saying, and now Pat's going to say something about them needing to have died at the end.
It would have been a better ending.
I don't know. No, it would not have. And like I said, I toyed with putting it on my list or not. And I think that, this is a good representation of all 3 Toy Story movies. I love all 3. Toy Story is a rare trilogy where all 3 of the films are great.
For sure.
And I could probably do without Toy Story 4, which is be coming out in the next few years.
Yep.
We don't know a lot about it, but we do know that it will have to do with Woody reconnecting with Bo Peep, which sounds kind of silly to me. And like it won't have the heart that a movie like this has, or like the previous two have. But yeah, I think that it's deserving of a spot on my top 10 for now, because I still think of it fondly and connect with it.
For sure.
All right. You don't have anything to say except they should have died at the end?
They should have died at the end. I mean, I agree with what you said. It's a great movie, and I agree with the fact that it is kind of strange that we grew up with this franchise. Like, I'm a little bit older than you are, so I was obviously a little bit older than you when the first movie came out, because that's how time works. And I mean, I didn't quite connect to these movies like you did, but I really love these movies. They're in my collection. I adore them. And if they had died at the end, maybe this movie would have made my list.
Awesome. So speaking of how time works.
Okay.
Number 6 is Back to the Future.
Okay, 2 time travel movies on your list so far.
I know, and that's funny because as I was putting this together, I'm like, man, Pat fucking hates time travel. And there's 2 on my list. Spoiler alert, there are no more time travel movies on my list.
Good.
But I do adore Back to the Future. And honestly, unlike the other movies on this list, I can't even remember the first time I saw it. It's just kind of always been there for me. It's always been in the background of the movies that I've seen and the movies that I love. And I wish I remember, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain, but it's just kind of always been there in the filmography at the back of my mind. So, I mean, what is there to say about this movie that hasn't been said before? It's spellbinding. It sucks me in every time I see it, whether it's on TV or if I sit down and just put it on for background noise while I'm doing something else. I end up getting more interested in watching it than whatever I was planning on doing in the first place. I don't know. It's just kind of formed a context around the movies that I love and the filmography I enjoy. Like I said, it had to be on this list for me. It defines the 80s. It has a ton of charisma and fantastic performances, especially from Michael J. Fox. And also, I mean, I've said it before, I'm just a sucker for adventure movies, a good adventure movie. And while this movie is a time travel movie, it's essentially an adventure for Marty McFly having to get back to present day without messing too much up. So the script is nearly flawless in my opinion. I mean,
except for the ending.
I mean, I would agree with you. I would appreciate this movie a lot more if it were just standalone, but the fact that it has to kind of lead up to a sequel is a bit of a bummer for me.
And you have a time machine. Why do you have to hurry? I don't think they understand how time works.
And I can probably guess that this will not be on your top 10.
No, it will not. This is kind of embarrassing because all my friends in high school and everything, they adore this movie. And I agree with what you've said, but this movie I didn't see until like 4 or 5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. I own the trilogy, but I don't know. I just didn't connect to this movie like all of my friends did.
Yeah, and it might be a thing where I know it's probably on my list because it's a movie I saw when I was really young. And
sure.
Like I've said a couple times now, it's just kind of always been there for me.
Yeah.
Like it's always been at the back of my mind and the back of my filmography, like a movie that's just, I'm rambling, but it's just been a movie that kind of defines my taste in movies. And we'll get into more of those as we get into my top 5 in a couple weeks. But maybe that's with you only seeing it in adulthood. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably been longer than 5 years ago, but I know I was in college the first time I watched this movie, which seems odd to me, but.
And I would say there are movies that other people love that I saw for the first time later in life and I just don't connect with like they do.
Yeah.
I wish I had an example off the top of my head, but I don't. But I know that there are definitely a lot of 80s and early 90s movies that my friends love that I didn't end up seeing till high school or college that I don't really care for.
Yeah, I think everybody has those gaps. I mean, as big as movie buffs as we are, there's just so many great movies that come out each year. And I think you watch more movies than I do. And I'm sure that there's some that just slip through the cracks. It just,
for sure.
It has to be, you would have to watch movies 24/7 to see everything that comes out. So yeah, this was one of those movies. The Thing was one of those movies for me. So it doesn't necessarily, just because I watched it late, doesn't necessarily kind of mark it off my list. But yeah, this movie didn't make it for me.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a ton of movies that I can watch over and over and still enjoy, but this is one of them.
Sure.
And I think from this point of my list on, they're just all movies that I enjoy watching over and over, and they don't get old. So I'm excited to do my top 5 in a couple weeks, and I'm excited to hear your top 5 next week.
Yeah. It's been kind of nice. This episode, it's been a bit of a break for me. I enjoyed listening to your list. I enjoyed not having to prepare as much for the episode. This is, I think, the first episode ever that I didn't actually make any notes. I hope that you guys couldn't tell that I hadn't made any notes, but it was just one of those episodes I was really looking forward to hearing your list. And I think you built it correctly, I guess. That's kind of a weird thing to say, but I think you put a lot of time into it, and I'm happy with your list, I guess.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Not that I necessarily needed to validate you, but I appreciated it. I mean, there's some movies in there that obviously it's not my list, so I didn't put it in there, but I appreciated why you did.
Awesome. And like you said last week, I think as much as we talk about movies and review movies on this podcast, it's important for us to put our favorites out there and kind of give the people who take time out of their life to listen to us kind of a context of how we're grading movies and how we watch movies.
For sure. All right. So our last segment, we just like to end it with just a kind of a nerdy question. We ask each other what our favorite blank is. We take turns each episode. It is my episode, so I'm going to ask you, and this is going to be a strange question. I don't know if you're going to have a answer to it or not, but we talked about Fear the Walking Dead at the beginning, and that, of course, is a spinoff of The Walking Dead. So I thought it would be cool to ask what your favorite spinoff is. Okay. I think there's a lot of good ones. I mean, they're just kind of it's a weird question, though. I like the Colbert Report, Better Call Saul. I mean, there's a lot of them if you really kind of dig into it and think about it. Mine is the obvious of the obvious choices, and it is The Simpsons. A lot of people, I don't know if they know that it's actually a spinoff of the Tracy Ullman show. Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
I've never actually watched it. So I watched the original, like the Simpsons that aired on that show, but I've never watched an episode of that show from start to finish. We've talked about this show before. We both love it. It was both a big part of our childhood. I watched the Simpsons movie and loved it. I actually went to the one of the 10 or 12 quickie marts that they made. Well, they made 7-Elevens into quickie marts for the movie. I actually got to go to one of them.
That's awesome.
And it was a lot of fun. The Simpsons movie was one of the 29 that almost made my top 10. I love that movie. It's fucking hilarious. I just love The Simpsons. It's such a great show. I don't want to say that I don't think it gets the credit it deserves, because it gets a ton of credit. People love this show, but I don't think people realize for as long as it's been on, people shit on the recent seasons. And yes, it hasn't been as good, but it's still a really fucking funny show.
I agree. I think that I hate whenever I see articles or opinions that kind of shit on the most recent episodes, but this show's been on for over 20 years and still delivers funny content. Like, what other show has ever done that? And there's not one. Yeah. So, I don't know. If we ever did a top 5 favorite TV shows or something, it would definitely be in my top 5, if not like 2 or 1. Like, it's one of the best shows of all time.
That might be something that we'll do next year, since we're doing movies this year.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right, so that's pretty much. I mean, what else am I going to say about The Simpsons? We've gushed over it when we did my Simpsons marathon a while back when FX got all of the Simpsons episodes. We talked a lot about it then. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the future. So, Tyler, what is your favorite spinoff?
So, whenever you asked that, unfortunately, everything that rushed to my brain are the terrible spinoffs, like Joey. Well, what was the other one that came? I don't know. They're just usually typically pretty bad. Yeah. Frasier came to mind, but not that that's a bad show, but it's just
I like Frasier. That would have been on one if I made like a top 5 or whatever. That probably actually would have been on mine.
Well, it probably would have been on mine too, just because I would have had a lot of options to choose from.
Yeah.
But it's just not a show that.
You never watched Better Call Saul?
Well, that's the thing. If I had finished the first season of Better Call Saul, it probably would be the answer. But I only saw the pilot.
Okay.
Because wherever I was streaming it from, legally or illegally, I can't even remember, to be honest. I couldn't get the second episode. And
Let's just say legally.
Yeah.
For the sake of the podcast.
I mean, everything I watch is legally.
Yeah.
Watched,
me too, for sure.
So I would say, never mind.
Yeah.
So the one that came to the top of my head, actually, even before you said it, when you were listing off good spinoffs, was The Colbert Report.
Yep.
I loved that show, and even though I'm excited for Stephen Colbert to take over The Late Show, I'm more disappointed that The Colbert Report's not on. Same with The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Those were both shows that I loved, and that I'm not a big news person. I don't really read the newspaper. I don't really sit around and watch ESPN or CNN or Fox News or anything dumb like that. So
yeah, the news is dumb.
Well, I meant that in regards to mostly Fox News. Not CNN's not dumb, but Fox News is pretty dumb. Not to get political, but you know, that's how I got a lot of my information was from those shows. And The Colbert Report obviously had the conservative twist on it that was tongue in cheek and hilarious. And Stephen Colbert played a character on that show, which was always funny. He delivered every episode and was very devoted to it. So I'm excited for him to take over The Late Show, but it's a bit disappointing that character is gone.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what the real Stephen Colbert is like and how he'll interview and have a show now on CBS. So
you mentioned The Daily Show, and I agreed, by the way, with everything you said about The Colbert Report. I love that show. It was hilarious, and I was also pretty bummed when he said he wasn't going to do the character, which makes sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's just a bummer that the character's gone.
I'm a little nervous for The Daily Show. I had heard of Trevor Noah, who's taking over for Jon Stewart, and I knew he worked on The Daily Show, but I'd never actually seen any of his stand-up. I wasn't that impressed. I watched it the other day. I mean, it's funny. He has some funny bits. I think he has unique perspective being from South Africa, and it's a completely different culture, and he talks about how his mother was white, and so, or maybe it was his father. I can't remember which one was white, and with the whole thing in South Africa, they had to, like, when they were walking down the street, they had to walk on separate sides of the street. Ugh. And so obviously there's
hilarious.
There's a comedic spin to it. He definitely has a unique perspective on life and just kind of just living. But I don't know. I just didn't think he was that funny.
I mean, they're obviously huge shoes to fill.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. I hope he succeeds, but I'm not entirely interested without Jon Stewart.
Yeah, I'm rooting for him because of all that shit that came out about him on Twitter and stuff like that. I thought he was already getting a bad reputation. I think people already wanted him to fail before he had even started. So I thought that was kind of shitty. And so I'm kind of rooting for him, but at the same time, I've kind of lowered my expectations because overall, I didn't think his stand-up special was all that funny.
Bummer.
All right. So I guess that's about it.
That should be it, man.
All right. As always, you can follow us on the Twitters at the Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Vote for us for a podcast of the month at podcastland.com. Subscribe to our new YouTube channel. I feel like there's other things. Email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. I really should just write all of these things down. I always have a hard time with this. Rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any podcatcher you use. We're on it. I think that's it. I hope. I'm really bad at this.
If we miss something, tune in next week, and I'm sure we'll pimp it at the end of the episode.
Oh, the Nerds Podcast, the thing that I've been working my ass off this last week on trying to post something every day. Definitely check that out.
TheNerdsPodcast.com.
Did I not say that?
You just said The Nerds Podcast.
Whatever. It's implied that it's .com.
Gotcha.
Anyways.
.eu.
Shut up. We're done. The podcast is over. For Patrick Kuhn.
Tyler Hunt.
We are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
See you guys.